I sat at the dinner table, fork trembling in my hand as my parents gushed over my brother's latest achievement. Brian had gotten a promotion at his job, nothing spectacular, just a small bump in his sales position. But you'd think he'd discovered a cure for cancer from how they carried on. "We're so proud of you, son," Dad beamed, patting Brian on the back. "You've always been our shining star." I cleared my throat softly. "Actually, I got some good news too. I received a promotion at work this week." Mom rolled her eyes dramatically, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Oh, please, Naya. Your little job at that insurance office? That's hardly worth celebrating." Brian smirked across the table. "Let's be honest, Mom. Nia's always been average at best. Some people are just meant for bigger things." The words stung, but what came next destroyed me completely. Mom leaned back in her chair, looking at me with cold disgust. "You should be grateful we even keep you around, Nia. Not everyone would put up with a disappointment like you." I bit my lip hard, tasting blood. Under the table, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. One day, I thought, you'll regret saying that. That night, lying in my tiny apartment, memories flooded back like a broken dam. Birthday after birthday, forgotten or dismissed. While Brian got elaborate parties for mediocre grades, I brought home straight A's to silence. I remembered being 12, winning the school science fair. I ran home, trophy in hand, bursting with excitement. "Mom, Dad, look what I won." Dad barely glanced up from his newspaper. "That's nice, honey." Brian had failed his math test that same day, but they spent an hour consoling him, promising ice cream and a new video game. When I was 16, I got accepted to 3 universities with scholarships. Mom's response? "Don't get too excited. College doesn't guarantee success, and frankly, you'll probably struggle." The worst was my 18th birthday. They forgot completely. I came home to find them throwing Brian a surprise party for making the baseball team. When I reminded them, Dad just said, "Oh right, happy birthday, kid." Years of being invisible, years of being told I'd never amount to anything. Years of watching them treat me like a burden while worshiping my mediocre brother. My phone buzzed. A text from my coworker Amy. "You're not going to believe this. Check your ticket now." My hands shook as I pulled the crumpled lottery ticket from my purse. I'd bought it 3 days ago on a whim, using the birthday nobody remembered. The numbers on my phone screen blurred through my tears. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, 49. I checked again and again. Each number matched perfectly. $47 million. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I just sat there in my cramped living room, staring at the ticket that had just changed everything. The tears came then. Not tears of joy, but of grief. All those years wishing for just a hint of love from my parents, and now I had more money than they'd ever see. The irony was bitter. I'd spent my whole life wanting them to notice me, to value me, to love me for who I was. Now I had something that might finally get their attention, but it felt hollow. I thought about all the times I'd gone to bed hungry because they'd forgotten to buy groceries for me while stocking the fridge with Brian's favorite foods. All the times I'd worn worn-out clothes while Brian got new everything. I wiped my eyes and whispered to the empty room, "They don't deserve a cent." The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think, to plan. The lottery office wouldn't open until Monday, but I spent the weekend researching lawyers and financial advisors. I found Harrison and Associates, a law firm known for discretion. When I called, I spoke carefully. "I need someone who can help me manage a large sum of money. Complete confidentiality is essential." The appointment was set for Tuesday. Until then, I had to act normal around my family. But a wicked idea started forming in my mind. What if I tested them first? What if I gave them a chance to show their true colors before I made any decisions about my newfound wealth? I'd spent 26 years being invisible to them. They'd made it clear I was worthless, a burden, a disappointment. But I wondered, how quickly would their tune change if they thought I had something they wanted? I smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been pushed too far and was finally ready to push back. "Let's see how much they love me now," I murmured, already planning my next move. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was the usual torture session. I arrived to find Brian already there, regaling them with stories about his weekend golf game. The moment I walked in, Mom's face soured. "Your hair looks terrible, Nia. And that car of yours is embarrassing. When are you going to do something with your life? I forced a smile and sat down. Throughout dinner, they continued their usual pattern, praising Brian for breathing while criticizing everything about me. But tonight, I had a plan. As we ate dessert, I dropped my first hint. You know, work's been really interesting lately. Really lucky, actually. I kept my voice casual, but I watched their faces carefully. Dad barely looked up from his pie, but I caught Mom's eyes flickering with curiosity. Lucky how? She asked, trying to sound disinterested. I shrugged. Oh, just some opportunities coming up. Nothing definite yet, but let's just say things might be changing for me soon. Brian laughed. What? Did they finally give you a desk by the window? But Mom's attention was suddenly focused entirely on me. Her eyes had that calculating look I'd seen when she spotted a sale at her favorite store. What kind of opportunities, exactly? The change was immediate and nauseating. Suddenly, Mom was offering me tea, something she'd never done in my entire life. She asked about my day, my work, my health. Dad even complimented my sweater, the same one he'd called frumpy just last week. Brian, not wanting to be left out, awkwardly patted my shoulder. You know, Mia, I've always thought you were smart. Really smart. You just needed the right opportunity. I almost choked on my tea. 3 days ago, he'd called me average at best. Now I was smart? The hypocrisy was staggering. Thank you, I said sweetly. That means so much coming from you. As I got ready to leave, Mom walked me to the door. Another first, she hugged me, something that felt as foreign as speaking a different language. You know we love you, right, sweetheart? You're our daughter, and we want what's best for you. I nodded, but as I reached my car, I heard her whispering urgently to Dad through the screen door. I crept closer, my heart pounding. If she's got money, we need to keep her close, Mom hissed. I don't care what it takes. We've been too hard on her. We need to fix this before she gets ideas. I drove home with a bitter smile. The test was working perfectly. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. She never called me unless she needed something. Naya, sweetheart. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Your father and I were just talking, and we realized we don't spend enough time together as a family. Would you like to come for dinner Thursday night? Just us four, like old times. Like old times? What old times? The old times when they ignored me, or the old times when they made me feel worthless? That sounds wonderful, Mom. I lied smoothly. I'd love to. Thursday evening, I arrived to find the dining room set with their good china, the stuff they only used for special occasions. Candles flickered on the table, and soft music played in the background. It was like stepping into an alternate universe. Dad stood up when I entered. He actually stood up. Naya, you look beautiful tonight. I was wearing the same black dress I'd worn to Christmas dinner 3 years ago, where Mom had said it made me look like I was going to a funeral. During dinner, they hung on my every word. When I mentioned a client at work, they acted fascinated. When I talked about my weekend plans, they offered suggestions and asked follow-up questions. Brian raised his glass. To our amazing sister, we're so proud of you, Naya. I clinked my glass against his, fighting the urge to laugh or cry. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead lingered in the hallway. Voices drifted from the kitchen, where Mom and Brian were cleaning up. This is our chance, Brian was saying, his voice low and urgent. If she gives me just a fraction, I can finally buy that car I've been wanting. The BMW, you know, I deserve it after putting up with her weird moods all these years. My blood turned to ice. Putting up with my weird moods? I'd been the perfect daughter despite their constant cruelty. Mom's voice was equally calculating. We need to make her feel guilty if she hesitates. Remind her of all we've done for her, all the sacrifices we've made. She owes us. Exactly, Brian agreed. I mean, we raised her, fed her, put a roof over her head. The least she can do is share her good fortune with family. I pulled out my phone and hit record, capturing every vile word. My hands trembled with rage, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was exactly what I needed. When I returned to the living room, they were all smiles again. Dad patted the couch next to him. Come sit with your old dad, sweetheart. Tell us more about these exciting changes at work. I sat down, phone still recording in my pocket. Over the next week, I played my role perfectly. I dropped more hints about my good fortune and watched them transform before my eyes. It was like watching actors in a play, except the performance was sickeningly transparent. "You know," I said during another dinner, "I've been thinking about helping people out. Maybe I can do something nice for the family soon." Their eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Mom actually clapped her hands together. "Oh, Nia, you're so generous. You've always had such a big heart." Always had a big heart? Where was this appreciation when I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for college while they funded Brian's useless art degree? Dad leaned forward eagerly. "We've always supported your generous spirit, haven't we, honey? Remember how we taught you to share?" I remembered sharing, all right? I remembered sharing my portion of food when money was tight while Brian got seconds. I remembered sharing my bedroom when his friends stayed over while he never returned the favor. But I smiled sweetly. "You're right, Dad. Families should take care of each other." The words tasted like poison, but their faces glowed with greed, poorly disguised as love. Mom grabbed my hand. "You're our favorite, Nia. You've always been our favorite daughter." I was their only daughter. Within days, word had spread through their social circle like wildfire. Apparently, Mom couldn't resist bragging about her successful daughter who was about to buy them a new house. My phone started ringing with calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Nyla, who'd snubbed me at every family gathering, suddenly wanted to reconnect. Cousin Tyler, who'd made fun of my clothes throughout our childhood, was asking when we could get together. "Nyla," Nyla gushed during one call. "Your mother tells me you're doing so well. I always knew you had it in you. You were always special, even as a little girl." Special? She'd once told my mother I was too quiet and weird and suggested I needed therapy. But the most telling call came from my Uncle Frank. "Your parents are so excited about the house you're buying them. They can't stop talking about your generosity. When's the housewarming party?" House? I'd never mentioned buying them a house. They were already spending money I hadn't given them, spreading lies about promises I'd never made. That evening, I called Mom. "I've been thinking we should have a big family dinner next week. Everyone should be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. I have something important to share." "Oh, wonderful," Mom practically sang. "I'll call everyone right now. Make sure Cousin Jamie comes too," I added. "And bring everyone." I rented the private dining room at Marcello's, the fanciest restaurant in town. The cost was astronomical, but it would be worth every penny. I wanted this moment to be memorable. When my family arrived, they were dressed to the nines. Mom wore a new dress I'd never seen before, probably bought in anticipation of her windfall. Dad had gotten a haircut and was wearing his best suit. Brian strutted in wearing expensive cologne that reeked from 10 feet away. The extended family filled the room, 23 people total, all of whom had treated me like furniture for most of my life. Now they smiled and hugged me like I was their long-lost treasure. "Nia, darling," Aunt Nyla cooed, air kissing my cheeks. "You look absolutely radiant. Success suits you." Uncle Frank shook my hand vigorously. "So proud of you, kiddo. Always knew you'd make it big." The lies flowed as freely as the expensive wine I'd ordered. Everyone had always believed in me, had always known I was special, had always thought I'd be successful. I smiled and played along, my phone hidden in my purse, recording everything. The trap was set perfectly. As dinner progressed, the conversation naturally turned to my success. I let them fish for details, giving vague answers that kept them hooked. The anticipation in the room was palpable. Everyone waiting for me to announce how I'd be sharing my good fortune. Brian, emboldened by wine and greed, raised his glass. "To our amazing, generous sister. The most successful person in our family." Everyone cheered and drank. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward. "Thank you all so much," I began, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. "It means the world to me to have my loving family here tonight. You've all been so supportive, so encouraging." I paused, looking around the room at their eager faces. "I want to thank you for teaching me so many valuable lessons over the years. About family, about love, about what really matters in life." Mom beamed. Dad nodded proudly, and Brian looked like he might burst with anticipation. "In fact," I continued, pulling out my phone, "I've been recording some of our recent conversations, and I thought tonight would be perfect to share them with everyone. So we can all hear what a loving, supportive family sounds like. The color drained from Mom's face. Dad's smile faltered. Brian suddenly looked sick. I pressed play on my phone, and Mom's voice filled the room. If she's got money, we need to keep her close. I don't care what it takes. We've been too hard on her. We need to fix this before she gets ideas. Gasps echoed through the dining room. Aunt Nyla's mouth fell open. Uncle Frank looked confused, then disgusted. My younger cousin stared at my parents in shock. Mom tried to interrupt. "Naya, sweetheart, that's taken out of context." "Oh, there's more," I said calmly, advancing the recording to Brian's voice. "If she gives me just a fraction, I can finally buy that car I've been wanting. I deserve it after putting up with her weird moods all these years." The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. Cousin Jamie shook her head in disbelief. Uncle Frank's face darkened with anger. "And this gem," I continued, playing Mom's voice again. "We need to make her feel guilty if she hesitates. Remind her of all we've done for her, all the sacrifices we've made. She owes us." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents sat frozen, their fake smiles cracked and broken. Brian stared at his plate, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Aunt Nyla was the first to speak. "Is this real? Did you actually say these things?" Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Oh, I'm not done yet," I said sweetly. I played the next recording. Brian again, his voice dripping with entitlement. "I mean, we raised her, fed her, put a roof over her head. The least she can do is share her good fortune with family. She's always been pathetic anyway." Uncle Frank stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Brian, how could you say that about your own sister?" "It's not. I didn't mean," Brian stammered, his face bright red. Cousin Tyler, who'd bullied me throughout childhood, looked genuinely disturbed. "Dude, that's messed up. Even I was never that mean to you, Nia." The family members began talking among themselves, shooting disgusted looks at my parents and brother. The unity they'd shown when they thought I was their meal ticket had completely dissolved. "She's lying," Brian suddenly burst out. "Those recordings are fake. She probably hired actors or something." I laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "Actors? Really, Brian? You think I hired actors to sound exactly like Mom and Dad?" Aunt Nyla pulled out her phone. "I'm calling you right now, Brian. Let's see if your voice matches." His phone rang, and when he answered with a shaky hello, the similarity to the recording was unmistakable. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," Nyla said, her voice cold as ice. I set my phone down and looked around the room. "Since we're all here, let me share some other gems from my loving family. These are things they've said to me over the years." I cleared my throat and began reciting, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Dad, when I graduated valedictorian, don't let it go to your head. High school doesn't mean anything in the real world." Dad winced visibly. "Mom, when I got my first job, it's just a starter position. Don't expect too much from yourself." I paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "And my personal favorite, from just last week, you should be grateful we even keep you around. Not everyone would put up with a disappointment like you." The room fell completely silent. Several relatives looked horrified. Cousin Jamie had tears in her eyes. "This is who they really are," I said calmly. "This is how they've treated me my entire life. While they bragged about Brian's mediocre achievements, they dismissed every success I ever had. While they celebrated his failures and consoled him, they told me I'd never amount to anything." Uncle Frank's voice was tight with anger. "Is this true?" My parents couldn't speak. Their silence was answer enough. "Does this sound like love to you?" I asked the room. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Dad cleared his throat, his voice shaky and desperate. "Nia, sweetheart, we didn't mean those things. You know how stressed we get sometimes. We say things we don't mean." "Exactly." Mom jumped in, her voice high and panicked. "We've always loved you. You're our daughter. Sometimes families say harsh things, but deep down, we've always been proud of you." Brian nodded frantically. "She's right, Naya. We love you. We're sorry if we hurt your feelings, but we're family. Family forgives each other, right?" I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw nothing but fear. Not remorse, not genuine love, just terror at losing something they thought they could have. 26 years, I said quietly. 26 years of telling me I wasn't good enough. 26 years of favoring Brian while making me feel invisible. 26 years of criticism and cruelty. But we can change, Mom pleaded. We'll be better. We'll make it up to you. With what? I asked. Fake kindness? Forced smiles? Pretending to love me because you think I have something you want? I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. The room watched in tense silence. This, I said, holding up the envelope, is what I've decided to do with my lottery winnings. Their eyes fixed on the envelope like hungry wolves. I opened the envelope slowly, savoring the moment. Inside were bank receipts and legal documents. I pulled out the first page and read aloud. Donation receipt, Children's Foundation for Neglected Youth. Amount $15 million. Mom's face went white. 15 million? I pulled out another receipt. Boys and Girls Club Scholarship Fund, $5 million. Brian gripped the edge of the table. Naya, what are you doing? Foster Care Improvement Program, $3 million. I continued reading. Homeless Youth Shelter, $2 million. Child Therapy Services, $1 million. The numbers kept climbing. With each donation I announced, their faces grew paler. $26 million. Gone to charities that helped kids like me, kids who'd been ignored and neglected by the people who were supposed to love them. What about us? Brian finally exploded, his facade completely cracking. What about your family? I looked at him with cold satisfaction. What about you? You just heard me donate millions to help neglected children, and your first thought is, what about me? That tells me everything I need to know. Dad tried a different approach. Nia, charity is wonderful, but family comes first. We could have used some of that money. We have needs too. Needs? I laughed bitterly. What needs? The need for Brian's BMW? The need for a house you haven't earned? I stood up, feeling taller and stronger than I ever had in my life. The whole room watched as I delivered the words I'd been saving for this moment. You want to know what you taught me? I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. You taught me that I wasn't worth loving. You taught me that nothing I did would ever be good enough. You taught me that I was a burden, a disappointment, a failure. My parents tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. But most importantly, I continued, you taught me to survive without love. You taught me to be strong on my own. You taught me that the only person I could count on was myself. I smiled. Not the fake smile I'd been wearing all evening, but a real one filled with genuine relief. So thank you. Because of your lessons, I learned to build a life that doesn't need your approval. I learned to find my own worth. And now, just like you taught me to survive without love. I paused, savoring the moment. Now you'll survive without my money. The words hit the room like a bomb. Mom lunged forward across the table, her composure completely shattered. You ungrateful little? But Aunt Nyla caught her arm. Sit down, Helen. You've done enough damage. The room erupted in chaos. Half the family was shouting at my parents, disgusted by what they'd witnessed. The other half sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. You should be ashamed of yourselves, Uncle Frank yelled at Dad. How could you treat your own daughter like that? Cousin Jamie stood up, her voice shaking with anger. I can't believe I'm related to you people. Naya, I'm so sorry. If I'd known. None of us knew, Aunt Nyla said, still restraining Mom, who was practically foaming at the mouth. But now we do. Brian tried one last desperate play. You're all overreacting. Every family has problems. This doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything? Tyler shot back. Dude, you called your sister pathetic on a recording. You planned to manipulate her for money. That's not normal family problems. My parents sat there, completely isolated as their extended family turned against them. The people who'd been congratulating them an hour ago now looked at them with disgust. I think we're done here, I said calmly, gathering my purse. Mom made one final attempt. Nia, please, we can work this out. Don't leave like this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. I'm not leaving angry, Mom. I'm leaving free. And with that, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the family that had never truly been mine. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside Marcello's. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely. Behind me, I could still hear the commotion, raised voices, accusations, the sound of chairs scraping as people stood to leave. I walked to my car slowly, savoring each step. My phone buzzed with text messages from relatives who'd witnessed the confrontation. Most were supportive, apologizing for not knowing, offering their love and encouragement. But there was one message that made me pause. It was from cousin Jamie. I knew something was wrong all those years, but I was too young to understand. You deserved so much better. If you ever need family, real family, call me. I smiled, tears blurring my vision. Not tears of sadness this time, but of relief. Of freedom. Of knowing that some people in this world understood what real love looked like. As I started my car, I saw my parents and Brian emerge from the restaurant. They looked around frantically, probably hoping to catch me before I left. But I was already pulling out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I watched them get smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from Mom. We need to talk, please. I glanced at it and kept driving. 3 days passed in blissful silence. I'd taken time off work to process everything that had happened. The weight of years of emotional abuse was finally lifting from my shoulders, but I knew the healing process would take time. I was reading on my couch when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw Mom standing there alone, looking haggard and desperate. She'd been crying. Her makeup was smeared and her hair was unkempt. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Naya, she breathed, relief flooding her face. Thank God. I've been calling and texting. Why haven't you answered? Because we have nothing to discuss. I said simply, please, just listen to me. Her voice cracked. I know we made mistakes. I know we hurt you, but we're family. Family forgives each other. I studied her face, looking for genuine remorse. All I saw was desperation and calculation. We can start over, she continued, stepping closer. We'll treat you better, I promise. We'll make up for lost time. But you can't just abandon us completely. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Is that a threat, Mom? Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the manipulative woman underneath. If you don't give us something, we'll tell everyone you abandoned your family. People will think you're heartless. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw her clearly for the first time in my life. Not the woman who'd given birth to me, not the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally, but exactly what she was. A manipulator who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. Let me make something very clear, I said, my voice steady and calm. I don't care what you tell people. I don't care if you tell the whole world I abandoned you. Anyone who knows the truth will understand. Her eyes widened with shock. She'd expected me to cave, to give in to emotional blackmail the way I always had before. But Mom, I continued, stepping closer to her, if you want to play that game, remember that I have recordings of everything then. I have proof of exactly who you are and how you've treated me. So go ahead, tell people I'm heartless. I'll tell them why. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. I'm done letting you control me. I'm done being your victim. I'm done pretending we're a family when all you've ever seen me as is a disappointment. I stepped back into my apartment and began closing the door. Say whatever you want about me. I finally don't care. The door clicked shut, and I turned the deadbolt. On the other side, I heard her sob once, then walk away. I pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer, make sure they can't touch a cent. 2 weeks later, I stood in the foyer of my new home, a beautiful, light-filled house with large windows and warm, bright colors. Everything was the opposite of the dark, cramped apartment where I'd hidden from the world for so long. The moving truck had just left, and boxes were scattered throughout the rooms. But it already felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever lived. This house was mine, bought with my money, filled with my choices. My phone rang. It was Amanda, the director of the Children's Foundation for Neglected Youth, one of the charities I donated to. Nia, I have wonderful news, she said. Your donation has already helped us expand our counseling services. We've been able to reach 12 new children this month alone. That's amazing, I said, walking to my kitchen window that overlooked a small garden. I was wondering if you'd like to visit sometime? Meet some of the kids? I think they'd love to know who their guardian angel is. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. I'd love that. After we hung up, I started unpacking boxes. In one, I found a photo from my college graduation. I was standing alone, diploma in hand, beaming with pride. My parents hadn't come. They'd said they were too busy with Brian's baseball game. I placed the photo on my mantle, but this time, looking at it didn't hurt. That girl in the picture had survived, had thrived, had become someone worthy of love. 6 months later, I sat on my back porch at sunset, a cup of tea warming my hands. The garden I'd planted was blooming, bright flowers that caught the last rays of sunlight. Everything around me was alive, growing, thriving. My phone sat beside me, silent. I'd changed my number months ago, cutting the final thread that connected me to my toxic past. The peace that followed was indescribable. Earlier that day, I'd visited the Children's Foundation. A little girl named Sophie had drawn me a picture, a stick figure family labeled My Chosen Family. She'd been in foster care for 3 years after her parents abandoned her. Looking at her art, I saw myself reflected in her resilience. Sometimes, I'd told her, the family we choose loves us better than the family we're born into. She'd nodded seriously, far too wise for her 8 years. Now, as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about that scared, invisible girl I used to be. The one who'd believed she wasn't worthy of love, who'd accepted cruelty as normal, who'd spent years hoping for scraps of affection from people incapable of giving them. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth. I raised my teacup to the sunset and whispered, I finally chose myself. Standing up, I walked back into my house, my sanctuary, my refuge, my home. The life I'd built was mine, earned through my own strength, filled with people who loved the real me. I was finally, truly free.